Our group 4 project was on Mozambique flooding in the year 2000. The Mozambique flooding was basically caused by heavy rains that was in South Africa, which lasted for about 5 weeks. As water changes from its original state to other state, it's moved around the planet by wind currents. The wind currents are generated by the heating activity of the sun. In warmer regions, hot air rises up into the atmosphere, pulling cooler air into the vacated space. In cooler regions, cold air sinks, pulling warmer air into vacated space. The rotation of the Earth breaks this cycle up, so there are several smaller air current cycles all along the globe.
Oh, uh, the climatic conditions of Mozambique indicate that the country is subject to various types of events that can originate floods. Therefore, considering the extensions of the country, the large areas of its major basins, and the climatic conditions, it is quite natural that fires of various degrees of severity occur repeatedly, sometimes with the devastating effects, as it happened with the fires of April to March 2000. The Mozambique fires of 2000 had a lot of effects to the nature and the physical view of the country. Energy sources, hydroelectric power, and the electricity production was destroyed.
Okay, now into the biology aspects. There were many biological effects that were caused by the Mozambique flooding back in the year 2000. There were damages to the country's population and environment. Not to mention, the economic system was also affected by the flood's destruction in the months of February through March. The effects on the environment were the flooding that usually brings infectious diseases. The microbes and other living organisms tend to increase their numbers exponentially, their population levels reflecting environmental conditions and resource constraints. The effects on the population were that many thousands died, about 1 million people were homeless, there was a huge loss of personal possessions and livelihoods. By March, thousands of people had lost their homes and thousands more were trapped by flood waters. The effects on the economic systems were that some of the economic and social problems caused to Mozambique were the destruction of the few bridges and roads that were in the country. Those were washed away with the flood. 90% of the country's functioning irrigation infrastructure was damaged, causing the worst of the agricultural losses suffered. 1,400 square kilometers of cultivated and grazing land was lost, leaving 113,000 small farming households with nothing.
The Mozambique flood resulted in an increase in the accumulation of water and therefore an increase in the number of vector growth. A vector is a vehicle or organism that transmits an infective agent between hosts, and in this case, it is the animal and human. In Mozambique, the water was unsanitary because the sewage system was flooded, contaminating the water and soil with a variety of harmful bacteria and parasites. A parasite is an organism that lives in or on another organism and benefits by deriving nutrients at a host's expense. Malaria is a disease that is caused by the parasite Plasmodium. It is transmitted by the bite of a female Anopheles mosquito. Once she's feeding, there is a blood-to-blood contact, causing the parasite to spread. Malaria usually occurs in rainy seasons or wet and warm areas. The warm air of Mozambique plus the increase in water result in more mosquitoes being born and therefore more cases of malaria. You may also contract the parasite Cryptosporidium. It causes a gastrointestinal disease that begins when the parasite is ingested. It then travels to your small intestines and reproduces. Once the life cycle occurs, it burrows into the walls of your intestine and is later shed into the feces. Another type of parasite that you may contract is the roundworm, which causes an infection in the small intestines called ascaris. Once the parasite is inside, the adult worm lays its eggs, which hatches in the bowels. The larvae then burrows through the bowel walls and into the bloodstream, where it is carried into the breathing sac. Lastly, it is common to get bacterial dysentery because of the flooding. Bacterial dysentery is the inflammation and swelling within the intestinal walls. It is caused by a variety of common bacteria, which are Salmonella, E. coli, Shigella, and Campylobacter, that infect intestines, leading to a localized tissue damage and inflammation.
And the chemistry aspect and the impact of the flooding is Portugal sent a total of 8 tons of medicine to treat cholera and malaria, which were one of the most diseases found. One of the medicines that were used to treat malaria is quinine and tetracycline to cure cholera. The overflow of the water made a mixture of toxin and non-toxin gases. The most toxic components include hydrogen sulfide and ammonia, along with minor sewer waste such as gasoline, bleaches, carbon dioxide, and methane. These toxic materials and gases made respiratory very hard, causing the deaths. And now, the international effects is that it was 90% of the country's irrigation infrastructure was damaged. Second, it received a total of $453 million in international aid at donor conference, which took place in Rome in 2000. The United States and the UK armies helped the people in helicopters. Third, Mozambique was a very poor and undeveloped country, which meant that it had very few roads and bridges. But because of the flood, it was destroyed, which led to more economic and social problems. Mozambique was in the process of recuperating from the civil war a few years prior to the flooding.
The Mozambique flooding had a lot of effects to the nature and the physical view of the country. The energy sources, hydroelectric power, and electricity production was destroyed. The warning system informs people of the probable arrival of tropical cyclones at least 48 hours in advance. So the system brought about change about helping helping the Mozambique people to be informed about future floods. The floods were one of the costliest disasters in Mozambique history. Improvements were made to many aspects of the rescue and relief operation in 2001. The bridges and roads that were in the country were washed away. South Africa, Botswana, and Swaziland were also affected. Building a dam can be very expensive. Uh, Water is usually stored in a reservoir behind the dam. This water can then be used to generate hydroelectric power or for recreational purposes. Fertile soil. Now we go to positive effects of the Mozambique flooding, because there were some positive effects of the Mozambique flooding. More disaster measures were introduced. Fertile soil for growth of agriculture. The floods enabled the government to get involved in the weather issues, and they brought about the introduction of area warning from the radios and other news systems.
And that brings the end of our project. Thank you for listening.